What's up guys, it's Paraly5er here and welcome to another Grounded video? That's right, recently I've been playing a lot of Grounded, so I decided while I'm playing the game, why not also make some more videos on it. It's been a while since we've made a Grounded video, and I know I said I'm done, but I just can't resist. So here we are with 200 tips to help you in Grounded. Now this does include a lot of the tips that were in the 100 tips video, so there's about 70 repeat tips here I think, and then another 130 brand new tips on top of it. If you enjoy the Grounded videos and you want to see more Grounded videos on the channel, maybe every few weeks, then leave a like on the video so that I know you guys enjoy this content. Without further ado, let's get into the 200 tips, and hopefully at least one of these can help you. Tip number 1, parry. This is the most important game mechanic, is parrying or perfect blocking, and it is extremely important that you can learn enemy attack patterns and learn to block right as they attack you so that you can parry every attack. This is by far the best mechanic to utilize in the game, and it's going to make you the best possible Grounded player. Try to avoid ranged combat and just learn to melee combat and parry as much as you can. Tip 2. Analyze plant fiber, pebblets, and sap at the start of the game, because this will unlock the crude rope recipe from analyzing the plant fiber, it'll unlock the recipe for your first set of tools by analyzing the pebblet, and it will unlock the workbench from analyzing the sap, all of which are very, very important in the early games. Those are the first 3 items I would analyze if I were you. Tip 3. Analyze as many items as possible. Whenever you pick up an item in this game, you're going to see a little exclamation point over top of it a lot of the time. Now, this isn't guaranteed. This is only if it can be used in a crafting recipe. But as soon as you get that, you take it straight to a field station and analyze it. The more stuff you analyze, the more raw science you'll earn, the higher your brain power will level up, and the more recipes you'll unlock to craft more and more items. Definitely something you need to do. Tip 4. Turn on the surveyor scanner in the hedge to help find things all across the map. Now this one is in a little lab towards the start of the hedge area. You're going to have to take on a robot to get through here, but once you do get to the end, you will find the surveyor scanner. Once you turn this on, you're going to get a little cutscene, and this will allow you to scan for any item that you have scanned in the resource analyzer anywhere on the map. So as long as you've analyzed stuff in the resource analyzer, you can then use the surveyor scanner to find stuff all across the map. Tip number 5. Make sure you analyze grass planks and weed stems. A lot of people don't know that you need to analyze grass planks and weed stems. This is something that people forget because you actually have to pick these items up and carry them all the way to a field station, then interact with the resource analyzer, and you can actually analyze them from your hand since you can't actually put them in your inventory. This is going to unlock a lot of recipes to do with building, so make sure you do this as quickly as possible. Tip 6. Hitting grass blades with water droplets on them will cause the water to fall down, allowing you to drink it. This is as self-explanatory as it sounds. If you find grass with water on it anywhere in the yard, you can hit the grass with any weapon or tool, and it will knock the water down. Just be careful, it will roll away, so if you're near like a dirty puddle of water, the water can roll into it and then you'll lose the water. But this is a very good way to get water in the early game. Tip 7. Try not to craft too many bandages until you unlock fiber bandage efficiency. This is because it just wastes plant fiber and sap. In the early game, these are very, very expensive. They cost 2 sap and 3 plant fiber to craft. However, once you get the red anthill chip, you can buy fiber bandage efficiency for 1500 raw science, which is one of the best things to buy, as it's going to reduce the bandage cost to 1 sap and 1 plant fiber. Use a lot of bandages throughout your Grounded playthrough, so 100% I would recommend getting this as quickly as possible and not crafting too many bandages before you have it. Tip 8. Get a spinning wheel as quickly as you can and spin crude rope non-stop, because you always need more. This is another one where once you get a spinning wheel, it's going to save you so many resources. Normally, crafting crude rope is going to cost you 3 plant fiber for 1 crude rope. Once you have a spinning wheel, however, it's 1 plant fiber for 1 crude rope. The big difference is the spinning wheel takes a long time, so I would either recommend you craft multiple spinning wheels, or you start crafting it really early on and sleep as much as possible and make sure you're putting it on every time you sleep, because you're going to get a lot more crude rope this way, and you're going to need a lot more crude rope as well. Tip 9. Store your grass planks and weed stems on pallets. This is because if you're trying to build and you're near one of the pallets, it will actually pull from the pallet, whereas if you just leave your grass planks and weed stems on the floor, it's not going to pull from the pallets, it's just going to not pick them up, and you'd have to manually pick them up and put them onto the blueprints, which takes a lot longer. Tip 10. Items and chests will also be pulled when crafting or building objects within a 20 centimeter range. So if you're standing within 20 centimeters of a chest and you're trying to use the crafting workbench, or you're just building something that's nearby, like another chest, for example, then anything that's within that chest will also count towards your building capabilities. So if you have acorn shells in the chest and you're trying to make an acorn chest on the ground, then it will let you pull the acorn shells from the chest. Or if you're trying to craft some acorn armor, it will also allow you to pull that from the chest, even though it's not in your inventory. Tip 10.5. If you subscribe to Paraly5er, you get extra gold card luck and all the good grounded luck for trinkets too. Make sure you do it because we're nearly at 40,000 subs. Tip number 11. Put berry chunks and pupa on a drying rack, as crafting is way more expensive than just drying them. That's right, once you have a drying rack set up, you do not want to manually craft berry leather or pupa. You pretty much should never manually craft these. When you do craft them, it costs, I think, 3 berry chunks per leather, and it costs 5 pupa per leather. However, if you get a drying rack, you can put the berry chunks and the pupa onto the drying rack, and it's a 1-to-1 conversion. You just have to wait a little bit longer, but it saves you so many resources, and I highly recommend doing it. Tip 12, use the jerky rack to dry plant fiber into dry grass. You can indeed put plant fiber on a jerky rack and turn it into dry grass if for some reason there's no dry grass near where you live. Tip 13, you can get to the upper yard without building. Now this is one that people always say, well, just build to the upper yard. Okay, but this tip is about getting to the upper yard with no building involved and no tools involved whatsoever. You can just get here from the bottom of the yard to the top of the yard whenever you would like. No resources, no building, no nothing required. You can go here as early as you want in the game using this method. And yeah, if you want to collect late game resources early on, you just use this skip. It's pretty cool. Tip 14. Put a trail marker at your base to get home easily. This one is very self-explanatory. What you're going to do is craft yourself a trail marker and put any sort of icon you would like on it. Then, once you leave your base, you'll be able to see this trail marker from anywhere on the map. Even if you hide your icons from your screen by toggling the trail markers, you can still see it on the map when you pull it up. And yeah, you're going to need this in case you lose your base or just to make it easier to get home in general. Tip 15, put trail markers at points you want to return to later so you don't forget where they are. This could be something as simple as the red anthill, putting a trail marker there as there isn't a landmark there for some silly reason, or putting a trail marker on like milk molars in the early game if you don't have a tier 2 hammer and you want to remember where they are. Just anything you find interesting, you can always plop a trail marker down so that you don't forget where it is and you can come back to it later. Tip 16, build zip lines to travel across the map quickly. These are really good before New Game Plus in particular, as zip lines will allow you to take you across the map in pretty quick time, but they just make life easier. They are going to cost you quite a lot of silk rope, and you're going to have to build little zip lines all across the map to connect to like some sort of main hub. But I would definitely recommend you have at least 1 or 2, like one between the lower yard and upper yard, so you can get between the 2 places easily. It really depends where your base is, but I definitely recommend setting up a couple of zip lines, even if you don't want to set up a whole tower covered in them. However, you do need to realize that these become pretty useless once you get to New Game Plus 2, and you get teleporties, as these are just way quicker, even though they are expensive. Tip number 17, if you hold interact on an armor stand or an item frame, it will actually switch the item in your hand or your armor. So if you go up to an armor stand, you hold the interact key, it will actually swap your entire set of armor that is equipped. So if you have a bunch of different armor sets that you would like to set up, you can switch between them purely by having armor stands with them on. Same goes for the weapon stands. If you want to switch out the weapon you're holding, you can just swap equipped with the weapon stand and it will instantly equip that item into your hand. Tip number 18, you can put planks or stems on zip lines, but only if they go down. So if you have a zipline that goes down in trajectory, you can indeed put grass planks or weed stems onto the zipline and they will go along the zipline until they get to the end. If it's a steep zipline, they'll fly pretty far off the end though, you have to be careful of that. And if you go on the zipline while they're on the zipline, you will catch up to them and crash into them and fall off. This doesn't work going up ziplines, obviously, because there's not like a little zipper that will carry them up the zipline, even though there should be. So yeah, it only works going down ziplines. Tip number 19. Killing the ants in any ant nest will cause more eggs to spawn. This is particularly good for the red ant nest, because if you go and kill all of the ants, you're going to cause a lot of red ant eggs to spawn, which you can then collect and use to craft brat bursts. which are obviously the bombs in the game that you need for a lot of different things. But yeah, this is a very useful tip for utilizing and getting a lot more ant eggs. Tip 20, if you need the black ant eggs, if you're trying to make omelant for some reason, then you'll also need to take out the black ants on the shed porch, as well as the ones in the nest, as for some reason, these also count towards the ant count, so you're going to need to take those out if you're trying to get the eggs to spawn in the bottom of the black ant nest. Tip 21. If you craft and wear a full set of red ant armor, then going into the ant nest means that all the ants will ignore you, including the soldier ants, meaning you can go through here unharmed. Unless you pick up any of the ant eggs with ants nearby, which will anger the ants and they will start attacking you. So just be careful of this, but definitely use this to your advantage. Tip 22. Black and fire ant armor do not protect you from black and fire soldier ants. Only Ambassador works in order to stop these from attacking you. You can't just wear a full set of armor like you can with the red ants, but I highly recommend you get stage 3 of Ambassador to stop the fire worker and soldiers attacking you while you're running around the yard. Tip 23, you can hot deposit into nearby chests to sort your inventory much faster. Now on keyboard, I believe the hotkey for this is N. If you are on a controller, you press down on the D-pad, and then I believe it's the bottom left option to deposit in nearby storage. This just makes it so much faster to sort your inventory when you get home. Tip 24, you can hot deposit into one chest. You do this just by looking at the specific chest and either holding X on controller or holding E on PC, I believe, and that's just going to deposit the items from your inventory that stack into that chest. It won't deposit everything, just the things that stack. Tip 25, you can turn off hot deposit on specific chests. So if you have a chest with a bunch of weapons inside of it and you don't want to deposit into that chest because you have a Club of the Mother Demon in your inventory, for example, and you have one in the chest, then it will unfortunately deposit unless you go to the chest and you turn off the hot deposit option, in which case this will stop it from depositing when you do your deposit nearby. Tip 26, build all of your crafting stations near your chests. This is because crafting stations will pull from nearby chests within 20 centimeters of the crafting station, so you want to make sure your chests are near the crafting stations for when you do make items, so you don't have to pull stuff out of chests to go and craft things. Tip 27, open the resource analyzer at every field station. Whenever you go near a field station, you'll get a ping in the bottom left of your screen with a little icon. You have to open the resource analyzer inside of the field station in order to get rid of this annoying ping. Shout out to Emmy for this tip. It's a fantastic one that I never even knew was a thing, and ever since I've known, I use it every single game, especially every new game plus to remember where I have and haven't been. Tip 28, if you need plant fiber, then you're going to go ahead and use the grinder. You're going to grind up weed stems, and this is going to give you 8 plant fiber per weed stem. It's a very, very good deal and makes it very easy to get plant fiber. Tip 29, go to the lamps at night to find gnats as they're attracted to them. During the nighttime, the gnats will fly over to the lamps across the yard, so if you visit these lamps, you'll find a lot of gnats. If you need to kill them for the gold card or meat or gnat fuzz, this is where you're going to find them. Tip 30, dropping meat slurry actually attracts gnats. So if you are at the lamp and you want to attract them, or if it's during the day and you know where they spawn, you just go to where they are, drop some meat slurry on the ground, and all the gnats are going to fly towards it. You can use this to kill the gnat. It's a very, very effective method for farming the gnat gold card. I would highly recommend it. Just make sure they don't eat it, as it will tame them. Tip 31. Weevils love mushrooms. If you're looking to find weevils to kill them for either their meat or noses, all you need to do is go and check near the mushrooms across the map, like the giant mushrooms, and you're going to find weevils so easily, because they're always sniffing them, let me tell you. Tip 32. Damage type weaknesses in the early game and elemental weaknesses in the late game. In the early game, you're not really going to have elemental weapons at all, so I recommend you peep creatures and check what their damage type weakness is and use that against them. The one thing I will say is if they have a generic weakness, it's not going to show on the creature card. The only way you'll know this is on the wiki, unfortunately, for some silly reason. But when it comes to the late game, you want to start using those elemental weaknesses like spicy, fresh, sour, and assault. I always like to carry a weapon of every element around, and I just use whatever the creature is weak to elementally, as it just seems to be the best choice, and it's just so much easier, so I would definitely recommend doing this. Tip 33, get a pet for a buff. Now, taming pets is really easy for the most part. Aphid is probably the hardest one to get, but they all have some really cool buffs that you're going to want to get. If you get a pet aphid, for example, it's going to reduce your stamina drain by 20% while you're sprinting. If you get a black baby ant, it'll increase your damage resist by 50%. which is a huge buff and probably the best pet in the entire game. In terms of other pets, none of them are really that great. The red baby ant does increase your hauling strength if you're desperate for that, but I wouldn't really recommend many of the others, to be honest. Tip 34, tame a pet for more inventory. This is another important one. If you can tame yourself a pet, they actually have 20 inventory slots, so just get them to follow you all around the yard, and you can use them to store items on them for an extra 20 inventory slots, which is a whole 50% increase over the 40 slots you regularly have. Tip 35, pets are invincible unless you're on woe mode. If you're playing on medium or mild, or you're in a custom game, your pets will be invincible by default, which means that they just can't be killed, which is really useful. I will say to be careful with putting stuff on your pets though, as they have been known to glitch through the map and disappear, but they are invincible, so in theory you should never lose them and they should never die, so you should never have to worry about them getting killed. Tip 36, relocate pallets to move a bunch of planks or stems all at once. So if you're out farming weed stems or grass planks, bring the pallet with you. You relocate the pallet to where you want to chop the stuff down, then fill the pallet up, then relocate it back home, rather than running back and forth carrying weed stems or planks. This is a much quicker way to do it and will save you a bunch of time. Tip 37, build a sap farm using sap catchers. You can place these on any wooden part of the map, like the giant log or the tree stump, and that's going to allow you to farm sap. They farm 5 pieces of sap each, and I highly recommend this. You're going to need a lot of this for fiber bandages throughout the game. Tip 38, cooking meat on a roasting spit refills the spoil bar. So when you cook raw meat on a roasting spit, no matter how far the bar has depleted, when the meat comes off the roasting spit, the bar is going to be completely full. You can use this to your advantage, so you can purposefully wait until the meat is right about to spoil, then put it on the roasting spit, and it'll refill the bar completely to get as much time as possible on that meat before it spoils and you lose it forever, so that you can eat it. Tip 39, upgrade your gear to level 6. This is very important. You should always upgrade all of your gear as soon as you can to at least level 6, because this means you can repair it with repair glue. Now, before level 6, you have to repair the gear with a bunch of random parts, and it's way more expensive, and you can't carry all the stuff with you. Once you get past level 6, everything costs repair glue to repair, so it's so much easier to repair stuff if it all requires the same resource, and it's just definitely something you should do. Tip 40 goes hand in hand with 39, carry a stack of repair glue with you at all times. This means if you've got everything level 6 and you're carrying a stack of repair glue, you can repair your stuff anytime you're running around the yard, whenever you need to, if anything breaks. It's just an absolute thing you should do, and it's a great idea. Tip 41. Upgrading an item will fully repair it. So when you're in the early game, say your insect axe is about to break and you don't want to use your bombardier parts to repair it, you can instead just upgrade it for 2 brittle whetstone. This will give it more damage and durability, and it will fully repair the tool, which is really nice. I would be careful with this that you don't use too much brittle whetstone getting into those higher levels. I wouldn't level something up all the way to level 5 if you're not going to keep it for the late game, like the tier 2 tools, for example. However, it is very useful early on to put 1, maybe 2 levels into your items just to repair them to make it so much easier for you. Tip 42. Always carry a stack of bandages. Now, Grounded doesn't have any passive regen, which means you're not going to heal over time unless you have some sort of trinket or effect going that heals you. Therefore, I always recommend that you carry a stack of bandages with you. This is a must-have, as you can use them whenever you are losing health, and it'll slowly regen your health. Especially in New Game Plus, these are insanely overpowered. The higher into the New Game Pluses you get, the better and better bandages get, to the point where they just fully heal your health bar by the time you get to New Game Plus 10. Tip 43. You can cut down large mushrooms for chunks that you can then turn into bricks for building. Now, this one took me a long time to realize, because when Grounded first came out, you couldn't actually touch these large mushrooms, you would just hit them and it would do nothing. But since they changed it so you can chop down the large mushrooms and actually turn them into mushroom bricks, which you can use for building, so I just recommend when you're going across the yard, once you get your tier 2 tools, make sure you chop down these mushrooms. Tip 44, build with mushroom bricks. Now this is just going to make your life so much easier. Mushroom bricks are really easy to obtain, they're really durable, and they just take up only inventory space. Whereas things like grass planks and weed stems, they're going to take up like your holding space, which you can only really hold about 30 or 40 things at once, even if you're really trying and like putting on things like hauling hero and stuff, you know? So I definitely recommend to use mushroom bricks instead. Tip 45, use clay foundations for floors. Again, this saves inventory space. If you have the resources to make burr floors, you could use these too. They cost spiky burrs and lint rope. However, clay floors just cost 4 pieces of clay each. They're very, very cheap and easy to make. And again, you don't need to carry things like weed stems or grass planks to make them. Tip 46, 2 dew collectors per person. This is just a rule of thumb while you're playing Grounded, especially early on. You're going to want to build 2 dew collectors in the yard per person in your world, and this should be enough to suffice for drinking for yourself, plus filling your canteen. You could always add more if you need to, but this is my rule of thumb for how many dew collectors you're going to need in order to make sure no one goes thirsty. Tip 47, upgrade your lean-to to a bed for more buffs when you sleep, and then also upgrade from the crow bed to the petal bed as soon as you can for even more buffs when you sleep. These beds are going to give you additional buffs upon sleeping, which is really, really nice. You want to make sure to upgrade as quickly as you can. The petal bed is definitely the best, as it's going to give you comfy defense, which is going to make you much harder to kill throughout the day. The buff from the regular bed is just going to be things like hunger and thirst drain, I believe, and then there's no buff from the lean-to, so it's definitely worth the upgrade. Tip 48, trash items. Don't drop them on the ground. If you start dropping items on the ground, there's already enough stuff all over the map that's on the ground. Once you start dropping your own things, it's going to make a mess and cause a lot of lag. So just make sure if you're getting rid of any items, put them in like a trash can, and they'll get stored there, or just trash them all together to get rid of them, because it's going to cause lag if you just drop them on the floor. Tip 49, carry a stack of bombs to break open cracked rocks around the map. This is one of those ones in the game where early on, you just want to farm bombs from the Red Ant Hill. Maybe get yourself 10, 15 bombs. And once you have that, you're going to run around the map. And when you see cracked rocks, just use a bomb to break them open. This is going to be really useful. It's going to help you find things like molars and secret passageways. So I definitely recommend carrying a stack of bombs. Tip 50, once you get into the late game or into New Game Plus, carry the Moldy Matriarch Bomb. You want to make sure you farm this before you go into New Game Plus from the Infected Broodmother, as this is a tier 3 bomb that you can use all across the yard, and it's going to save you resources of crafting brat bursts. Yeah, it's just absolutely something you should have. Every New Game Plus, you're going to need to bomb all the cracked rocks, and this thing just makes it 10 times easier, so get your hands on it. Tip 51, heal basses can heal enemies. Now, you got to be careful with these, especially in solo. I wouldn't recommend them. They heal the exact same amount as the beefy smoothies do, but I'm just not a fan of them because they heal enemies as well. They can be more useful if you have a lot of players on your world. Say you're playing 4-player, one person can heal everyone with a heal basser all at once, and there's not a healing delay on them like there is with smoothies and bandages. However, I will say there's a big delay in throwing them, and also it's hard to block while you're holding a heal basser. So yeah, just be very careful with these things. I would definitely not use them in solo, but with more players, you could afford having someone as a healer to heal everyone. Tip 52, use molars to get to 5 mutation slots and have 5 mutations equipped at all times. Now this is one of the first things I would spend my molars on, is unlocking new mutation slots, especially if you have the mutations unlocked that you want to fill those slots with. Now, me personally, early on, I like picking up things like Natural Explorer and Cardio Fan, maybe Chopper as well. So I want to make sure I have the mutation slots to equip all of these mutations. And to do that, you're going to need to collect your molars and unlock the slots. I definitely recommend doing this as soon as possible. Tip 53, you can get into the Moldorc Castle by building only one singular place. Now, this is a very good tip as it allows you to get to the castle without building a giant bridge across. I'm going to show you footage here of me running and parkouring all over the place. The tiger mosquitoes will be very annoying and can still hit you, and you can still mess up doing this parkour. But just follow the path that I take and build a singular clay foundation. It's going to cost you 1 piece of clay to get into this castle. Don't build a giant bridge across. Just do it this way and it's much, much easier. Yeah, there you go, an easy way into Moldorc Castle. Tip 54, break rotten food in the trash can because it's going to drain your gas mask durability. There's a bunch of rotten food while you're running around the trash can and it's going to drain that gas mask durability, so you just break it as soon as you see it with your axe and get it out the way, because once it's gone, your gas mask is not going to take any durability drain anymore and you'll be able to run around absolutely fine. Tip 55, weapon tier is much more important than weakness. For example, I would personally use a tier 3 weapon that the enemy isn't weak to over a tier 2 weapon that the enemy is weak to, because I personally just think that the tier is so much more important. tier 3 weapons are so strong. Once I get that Termite Axe tier 3, it's pretty much the only weapon I'm going to use until I get some more tier 3 weapons, like the Club of the Mother Demon, or the Mint Mace, for example, or the Salt Morningstar, because the tier 3 symbol just makes the weapon so much more powerful, and I definitely recommend you use the highest tier weapons that you have. Tip 56, use bombs in the Broodmother fight to take down the Spiderlings and Orbweaver Juniors. This just means when she's doing her summons, make sure you bring bombs into the fight, drop them on the ground, and it's going to take out her summons instantly, especially if you do it just right. Might take a couple of bombs for the Orbweaver Juniors, but it'll be worth it because it makes the fight a lot easier and you don't have to deal with all of the adds. Tip 57, once you get into the late game or into New Game Plus, I recommend you bring the Spicy Staff into the Broodmother fight instead, as this is going to allow you to take out her summons much easier, especially if you have Whittle Wizard to bleed them to death as well. It's going to be by far a better choice than bombs are, and it also doesn't cost you as many resources. Tip 58, if you get right up against the Antlions in the pit, it makes it much harder for them to hit you while you're fighting them. This little dust attack that they do where they bury their heads in the ground, it just doesn't hit you if you're right inside of them while they're doing it. So you're just going to make sure you want to do that and then you don't take any damage. It makes fighting these guys much, much easier. Tip 59, make sure you loot the pit antlions as it reveals the secret tunnels below them and allows you to get much more loot from within them, like the salt caverns. So yeah, just make sure you don't leave them unlooted. Tip 60, complete the burgle quests when you can. These include the apprentice quests, there's 100 of them, and you're just going to want to complete them whenever you get the opportunity. It's very important that you do. You're going to get a lot of raw science from it. Some of them you'll just complete without even realizing, but make sure you're keeping on top of those and doing them whenever you can. Tip 61. If you still need raw science in the late game, use the waft emitter. You can use this to summon Black Widow raids, which will give you 1,000 science per Black Widow that you kill. You don't even have to do difficult ones, just like one Black Widow at a time, you'll get 1,000 raw science every time. This is mostly if you're going for 100% before New Game Plus. If not, then just don't even bother. Just go to New Game Plus and kill infused creatures to get raw science. Tip 62. Only plug the haze in the late game. The only reasons to plug the haze is if you want to fight the infected wolf spider or the infected broodmother. The third reason is to get burrs, which you can use for things like the Javmatic defense or building your base. However, I would say this is very dangerous to plug, so be very careful plugging this, but if you're confident enough, go ahead and do it. Tip 63, you can get burrs without plugging the haze on the shed porch or in the Javmatic storage facility. The shed porch, they're in this little plant pot right here by the mantis, and in the Javmatic facility, they're obviously just in the chests. This is the only way to get them if you're not planning on plugging the haze, so you have a very limited amount. Tip 64, wolf spiders can smell you. If you're walking around the yard near a wolf spider, every once in a while he'll stop and sniff the air with his little feet things, I don't know. But he definitely can smell you and track you down, so be very careful if you're near wolf spiders. Don't stay still for too long or they will find you. Tip 65, quartzite and marble rocks don't respawn. So be careful using them to upgrade things, you don't want to run out. You can, however, craft more later on in the game using the recipes that you unlock from fighting different bosses and fighting other things and gaining chips. However, just be careful, they will also respawn in New Game Plus 2, which will help you massively if you need more of these rocks, but they don't if you're not going to New Game Plus, so just watch out and don't overspend. Tip 66, build around the mixers. This sounds stupid, but some people don't realize that to defend the mixers, you're supposed to build a big defense around them with walls and stuff so that the enemies can't hit them. It sounds dumb, I know, but that is actually a tip on this list. Tip 67. Stand at the back of the boss room when you're fighting Schmector to avoid the lasers. When you're fighting Schmector and you get about halfway through, he's going to gain this laser attack, and if you stand exactly at the back of the boss room right here, it doesn't reach this far back. You'll be completely safe and you can avoid this attack. Tip 68. Granola bars only respawn when entering New Game Plus. You can also use the Super Duper to get more, but do be wary, they're essentially very limited as to how many you have, and they don't heal quite as much as the Beefy Smoothies do, so definitely stick to Beefy Smoothies. Granola bars do give you a bit of food on top though, but I just use them as you get them in the early game, to be honest, as heals. Tip 69. Collect the mussel sprouts from the pond dome as often as possible and use them in Beefy Smoothies. Beefy Smoothies heal you more than any other kind of smoothie, and the mussel sprouts respawn inside of this pond dome every 5 days, so make sure you collect them as often as you can and make as many smoothies as you can. Tip 70. You can farm mussel sprouts in garden patches. Now, the last time I made this video, you obviously couldn't farm them in garden patches, but now you can. You plant 1 mussel sprout, you get 2 in return, or you can get up to 4 depending on how lucky you get. But I would definitely recommend setting up a mussel sprout farm, especially if you're using a lot of smoothies, because you want as many of these beefy boys as you can get. Tip 71. Fireflies only come out at night, but during the day you can find them all up in the gutter on the side of the house here. This is kind of a pain to get to. You need to build a lot if you want to get up here, but if you're trying to get that Firefly gold card and you're really desperate, then there are a bunch of Fireflies up here during the day. This is where they all live, so there you go. Tip 72, covering the sandbox will stop you from sizzling while you're inside of it. Now, this is very expensive to do, and I don't expect many people to do this, but if you've got a lot of clay or something, you can cover over the entire sandbox with clay foundations, and it's actually going to stop the sizzle from coming through, and this will allow you to run through the sandbox without getting sizzled whatsoever. It's kind of useful, I guess, but it's a very, very, very big project to take on. Tip 73, Rock Cracker will allow you to break clay quicker. If you equip the Rock Cracker mutation, which is intended for breaking rocks faster, it also will improve your ability to break clay, both on land and underwater, allowing you to harvest it much faster with a shovel. Tip 74, block in between shovel attacks to harvest clay much quicker. Now, if you don't block between your attacks on the shovel, it has a really long animation time and it takes a really long time to harvest. However, if you attack and then block and then attack again, it becomes much, much faster, allowing you to harvest the clay in record time. Tip 75, break web sacks for tier 2 bug parts in the early game. This is going to spawn in spiderlings, which are going to be really annoying, but it's also going to give you things like bombardier parts, stink bug gas sacks, gnat fuzz, a lot of just really useful items which you're going to want and need in order to make tier 2 tools, so I'd highly recommend you do this if you don't want to fight things like bombardiers and stink bugs. Tip 76, break widowling web sacks in the late game, because this is going to allow you to get tier 3 parts like the Black Ox horns and the green shield bug parts. These are very valuable items to get, and you can get them easily by breaking the widowling web sacks, so I highly recommend you do this. Again, you'll have to fight widowlings because of this, but it's better than fighting Black Ox beetles and green shield bugs, trust me. Tip 77, you can punch the flowers in the lower yard for more flower petals. Now, this doesn't just work with punching, it works with everything like shooting and any sort of attack on them. These hosta plants right here in particular are the only ones that work. You can't just do it to all the different flowers across the yard. It's just these ones that look like this with the purple petals. You're going to just jump up and punch them or just shoot them with your bow, and petals are going to come flying off of them, and it makes it much easier to farm flower petals. Tip 78, if health is maxed out with molars, you can't die of fall damage. Now, if you have max health, then it's actually enough health to where you have more than the fall damage cap. So as long as you have full health when you fall, doesn't matter how far you fall, you simply will always live. This is particularly good in New Game Plus, because once you have like over 1,000 health, you basically take no fall damage upon falling, and you can just pop like a bandage or not even ever worry about fall damage, to be completely honest, ever again. It's really, really nice. Tip 79, pull the dandelion out when you're getting close to the ground. This will save you time more than anything, but most importantly, don't pull your dandelion and then put it away over and over, because it's going to waste multiple dandelions. If you have the fluffy one equipped, you can keep pulling it out and putting it away over and over, and it doesn't cost you anything. But just be careful doing this with the regular ones, it's going to waste a lot of them. If you do pull your dandelion, don't put it away, but I recommend pulling it late, as it's just going to save you a lot of time. You don't want to float down for 10 years in slow motion, basically. Tip 80, watch out for Trudy. Tip 81, always try to parkour things before building. Most of the stuff in this game can be parkoured too. You may be tempted to build, but always try the parkour method first, and you'll be surprised a lot of the time you can actually get there just by jumping. Tip 82, use the waft emitter to farm gold cards. If you really, really want to get gold cards before you go into New Game Plus for some reason, not that you need them, then you can use the waft emitter to summon certain raids, and a lot of these are going to allow you to get the gold card for the majority of the creatures. Tip 83, build high up in the air or on the pond if you want to avoid raids from ground creatures. Particularly the pond, you're just not going to get raids from ground creatures. This will make you get a lot more raids from things like wasps and mosquitoes though, which everybody hates. So just be wary, but I definitely recommend doing it. Tip 84, practice with orb weavers and wolf spiders in order to prepare for the broodmother and the widow. They have very similar attack patterns, so you'll notice if you can learn the attack patterns of the wolf spider and orb weaver, you're going to find it much easier to take on the widow and broodmother. Tip 85. You can find twinkling shells in the undershed very easily by going into this PVC pipe. There are 4 scarabs in here. They will always die in 1 hit now, so you can't use the stealing method to steal stuff from them. However, when killing them, you will kill 4 of them, and they have an increased drop rate, so you should be able to get about 20 twinkling shells if you do this right. Tip 86, for more twinkling shells, you can find a hidden backpack at the termite nest that has 5 twinkling shells inside of it, if you just look where I look in the clip right here. Tip 87, flares are useless. They light up an area temporarily, but they cost gunpowder and they're a complete waste of resources, so don't even bother using them. They only last about a minute as well. Tip 88, don't use shinobi sneezes. They make you invisible to enemies for a couple of seconds, but they also damage the player and reduce the damage that the player can inflict. It's just not a good idea. I really don't like this item. Tip 89, you can throw pollen at your enemies. This will deal high stun to them, which is very useful against flying creatures as it will knock them out of the sky instantly. Tip 90, use garden patches to farm resources. This is another very useful one. You can just place a bunch of garden patches once you've unlocked them and use them to farm a vast amount of resources like mushrooms, mussel sprouts, plant fiber, sprigs, all sorts of stuff. It does take a while, so it's only really useful if your base is far away from these resources, but it definitely can be utilized if you can make a huge farm. Tip 91, the fallen branch has a bunch of sprigs. Now, just come over to this area of the map right here, and you're going to find a dish, and underneath it there's about 200 sprigs that you can harvest and collect. I definitely recommend doing this if you have a shortage of sprigs. Tip 92, collect and analyze rotten items. This is going to give you brain power and raw science, both of which are very useful. And yeah, you always want to analyze every item, but make sure you collect these rotten items too, as they're very well hidden and worth analyzing. Tip 93, build up with single clay piece foundations. This is the most efficient and cheapest way to build up to things in the yard if you do choose to build, and it only costs 1 clay per piece, and I highly recommend you do it. It's by far the cheapest way to do it, and it is very, very easy. Tip 94, put a water collector under a juice carton. This will automatically collect the juice inside of the water collector, and it's going to make your life much, much easier. You can just grab some juice whenever you're running past, or if you have one near your house, you can even build some cute little juice hut around it like Emmy did here and make it look gorgeous. Tip 95, discover as many landmarks as you can. This will unlock Natural Explorer, which massively increases movement speed outside of combat and is one of my favorite mutations in the entire game. Tip 96, use the Sour Staff on moths. This is going to prevent them from attacking, because if you can consistently hit your Sour Staff shots, it's going to stun them every time you hit them, and this stops them from getting any attacks off, so I would definitely recommend that you do this. Tip 97, if you're farming weed stems, it's actually better to cut down the husky weeds. These are going to drop more weed stems, particularly this variation right here. They're going to drop about 20 weed stems per one that you cut down. It's best to identify which is which. Dandelions only drop 6 weed stems. These little V-shaped ones drop 4 weed stems each. And then there's another chunky base one that I call it. They drop about 10 weed stems per. But if you can identify which is which, you know which ones to cut down to get the most weed stems possible. Tip 98, if you want to get this molar without fighting the widow that's in the cave, you can do this little skip here using a weed stem, or you could use a teammate as well to boost yourself up onto this ledge and get it, and it also allows you to go down and kill the widow without having to drop into the hull and potentially risk just getting hit in the back. Tip 99, the Spider Fang Dagger works underwater, not just the Bone Dagger. Now, the Bone Dagger is the only one that's in the underwater category when you're crafting, but the Spider Fang Dagger does also work underwater, both as a weapon and a tool, so make sure if you do have one, you just use that instead of crafting a Bone Dagger. Tip 100, use the camera mode at night so that you can see where you're going. If you go into camera mode, you can actually just change the time of day, so if you're lost and you don't know where you are, this is going to show you where you are, or if you're doing parkour in the middle of the night and you can't see where to jump to or where your goal is, just go ahead and switch the time. It's going to make it much easier to see. Tip 101, use the blaster to farm clay in the stump puddle. Now, farming clay can be a pain with a shovel, but if you have the blaster of the Moldy Matriarch, you can just pull it out, go to the stump puddle where the most clay is, and just go to town, and this is going to break all of the clay and allow you to pick it up very, very easily and very quickly. Tip 102. Use recover backpacks to move all of your backpacks to the kid's case. This is particularly useful if you've died in a bunch of different places across the yard and you just can't be bothered to go and collect all of your backpacks. You can use this recovered backpack method, go back to the kid's case, and you'll find all of your backpacks are there and you get all your stuff back easily. Tip 103. In New Game Plus, you can use the Handy Nat to build blueprints wherever you would like, and you can fill things in with items in your inventory or in storage. So if you enter the Handy Nat while you're standing in your storage room, you can fill blueprints in from all across the map, and it's going to make your life much, much easier for building, especially like a zip line up to the wheelbarrow, for example. You can just Handy Nat up there. You don't have to go up there manually in New Game Plus. Tip 104. You can use the Handy Nat in New Game Plus to repair buildings. This means you don't need to carry a repair tool with you. The only time this is an exception is during a mixer. You actually won't be allowed to use the Handy Nat, so you'll have to use the repair tool to repair stuff. But I would highly recommend that you just don't carry a repair tool anymore and use the Handy Nat's repair tool instead. Tip 105. There's a loot all feature on the roasting spit and drying rack. This is going to make them much easier to loot. In the case of both of them, you just open the inventory and press W on a keyboard. If you're on a controller, I believe the button is left bumper to loot all, and this is going to make it much faster to take all the items off the spit without taking them off individually and messing it up. Tip 106. Use bombs or the multi-matriarch bomb to harvest clovers. This is a particularly useful method because clovers take forever to chop down. So instead, just throw bombs or the multi-matriarch blaster at them, and it's just going to destroy them all at once, and you can pick a bunch up at a time. This also works for things like dry grass. Tip 107. Bring a repair tool when you're doing mixers to repair the walls during the defense. Now, like I said, during New Game Plus, you won't be able to use the Handy Nat, but if you're not in New Game Plus, you won't have the Handy Nat either, so just bring a repair tool with you for when you're doing mixers, and if you find yourself not fighting any enemies because they're all dead, then take the time to use the repair tool to repair the walls that have been damaged. It's just going to make it easier and hopefully give you less chance of losing when defending the mixers. Tip 108. If you forget a repair tool, you can just recycle or break the walls and rebuild them. Now, if you're the one to destroy the walls when they're on low health, it actually will just give you all of the resources back. So especially with mushroom bricks, if they're really low on health, just break the wall and rebuild it. And just like that, it's full health again and you don't have to worry about it. Tip 109. Customize bounce webs to have different heights and angles. You can actually go up to a bounce web and press G on it, or left bumper, depending on your platform, and this is going to allow you to customize both the height and angle of the bounce web in case you wanted to use them to travel across the yard. Tip 110. You can change the pose of armor stands. Now, armor stands in the game are a way to display your armor, and you can change the way that they pose as well. You don't have to have them all in this boring normal pose. You can have them doing some really cool emotes and stuff. Tip 111. You can throw pebblets at widowlings to draw them out of the widow cave, and then you can take them out before the widow sees them, because once the widow sees you, she's gonna eat her babies, because she's very strange. So you want to make sure her babies are dead, because when she eats them, she gets a massive buff. Tip 112. You can rub stuffed bugs in the game, and it's going to give you a loot luck buff that's going to give you more loot from the specific creature that you rubbed. Tip 113. You can use trophies to mark foes. This is going to increase the damage you deal against that specific enemy. Tip 114. Don't build a bunch of the same object for coziness. Duplicate coziness is a thing, and it's going to give you way less of a coziness buff. As you can see here, 8 aphid statues gives me barely any coziness, but having 7 statues that are all unique, even though they have the same coziness as the aphid statue, give me a way bigger buff, because you don't want to just spam the same item to get coziness. It doesn't work. Tip 115. Get maximum coziness as early as you can. Even if this means spamming a bunch of furniture around your house, do it, because you'll unlock a bunch of new recipes, including the petal bed, which are very useful. And this is going to mean you can just destroy all that furniture after the fact and then build things like the petal bed and the chandeliers, which have much more coziness. Tip 116. You can skip the widow in the undershed by just running past it or parkouring above it, but I recommend just running past it, it's much easier. Tip 117. Duplicate boss summons. This is a really useful one, especially for things like the IBM and the Wasp Queen, and the Mantis. I highly recommend you duplicate them. It only costs 1,000 raw science. It's much easier than getting all of the resources again to resummon them, particularly in the case of the infected Broodmother, where you need things like toenails and all of the different boss heads. Just duplicate it for 1,000 raw science. It's so much easier. Tip 118. If you use water to kill enemies, like Pond for example, they're not going to drop you anything. They will give you no items whatsoever, so don't do this. Tip 119. Buy all of the scanners. This is going to help you find things like science, scabbies, and molars. Even if you're following guides and know where they are, I still recommend buying them because they're going to be useful. Tip 120. If you run out of bombs, then using Truffle Tussle allows you to break cracked rocks. So you're going to stand near the cracked rock, equip Truffle Tussle, and punch your enemies, and it's going to break the cracked rocks eventually after a few activations of Truffle Tussle. This is a last-ditch sort of thing, but it definitely works. Tip 121, you can use an interactive map if you would like to help you find things like molars and scabbies. I personally would recommend that you do this and tick them off as you go. However, there is a limit to how many things you can tick off on the interactive map. I'll leave a link in the description and on screen. I use Map Genie personally if I'm going to do it. Just use this if you're using 1 or 2 molars and you don't know where they are and you know which ones you have got. Tip 122, loot bodies for gold cards. Some people don't know this, but you have to loot the bodies of the creatures to get the gold card. It's no good just killing a bunch of creatures. You're not going to get the gold card. You have to loot them specifically for a chance at getting the gold. Tip 123, hit enemies in their weak points. A great example of this is hitting bees in their eyes. It'll deal much more damage and make them much easier to kill. Tip 124, if you're fighting a ladybug, just back up. The best way to fight these guys is to put one combo into them, then back up. You will pretty much never get a hit. The only attacks they're going to do is their charge attack, which should be much easier to parry, as well as all of the other attacks just not reaching you so long as you're backing up after every combo. Tip 125. Farm boss parts before you go into New Game Plus. I highly recommend you do this. You want to craft everything you can, including trophies and stuffed versions of every boss before you go into New Game Plus, because once you New Game Plus, they become much more difficult to farm and kill. Tip 126, don't poison the Ant Queens. It's just better to infect them. You get the same amount of parts, and it means they'll be infected in the next New Game Plus. The only reason I'd poison them is if you've already infected them 3 times and you have the maxed out Sausager, so you just don't need to infect them for any reason. Then you can just poison them and get all the trinkets and stuff in the chests that are hidden behind them. Tip 127, don't use explosives against the IBM. It's gonna heal her health. Just don't do it. Tip 128, once you get to New Game Plus 4, stay there. Farm tier 4 weapons and get some really good ones with really good effects. There's no rush to go to higher New Game Pluses after this, so make sure you get the good weapons that you need. Personally, I recommend the Infused Club of the Mother Demon. Tip 129, use the Empanadust, or as I call it, the Emmy-Panadust for the Java-Matic. This is another amazing tip from the wonderful Emmy, who came up with the idea of using the Emmy-Panadust during the Java-Matic, because this is going to mean that when the dust mites are throwing all their dust attacks around, it's not going to proc all of their effects in New Game Plus if you have this Gas Guard effect from the Emmy-Panadust. So I highly recommend you get this. Tip 130, make sure you use Dissection Expert when you're looting creatures once you have it unlocked. I would pretty much have it equipped at all times. It doesn't impact your gold card chance, but it's going to give you much more loot from creatures, particularly in New Game Plus if you need more infused ooze, or if you're looking to try and get more trinkets. Tip 131, build a fridge as soon as possible. Use it to store all of your cooked food inside and all of your meals, as this will stop them from spoiling. Tip 132, the only tier 4 infused weapon that works with Apex Predator is the Blaster of the Moldy Matriarch. For some reason, the Club of the Mother Demon and the Scythe of Blossoms don't work with Apex Predator, but the Blaster of the Moldy Matriarch does, so just be aware of this when you're farming those weapons and using this mutation. Tip 133, all beefy smoothies heal the same amount. So if you don't like the idea of using beefy soothing syrup, even though it's the cheapest one to craft, you could use something else that'll give you more stamina or damage dealt. It will be more expensive to craft, but they will all heal the same amount of health. Tip 134, the higher the New Game Plus you're in, the easier healing becomes. By the time you get to New Game Plus 10, a bandage will heal you fully, and the ticking effect from it is going to heal you for like half your health all at once, which means you never need to worry about effects like venom or like burning or anything. It's really OP. Tip 135. Make sure you collect all of the free resources every New Game Plus. This is things like the Java-matic storage room, or the undershed fridge. Just make sure you collect all the meals, all the items from them. You're gonna want them because they're just useful to have and it's free stuff. Tip 136, collect all molars every New Game Plus. Now, you don't necessarily need every single one because of things like Hunger and Thirst Drain. You don't need to upgrade that, but I would recommend you upgrade at least everything else. It's very useful to just have effects massively buffed. I have a video with all of the locations that you can check, and once you learn them, it becomes much easier to find them. Tip 137, don't bother redoing the mixers each New Game Plus. It just takes too long. Just kill the infused creatures. They give you 3,000 raw science each, and it's much easier. Tip 138, use the red anthill to farm trinkets and infused ooze. Once you get to New Game Plus 3, the red ants will start dropping science cones, and you can just use these to farm as many cones as you'd like, as well as the infused ooze and the raw science. Tip 139. Dedupe any and all trinkets that you don't need. This is going to give you deduper jelly, which you're going to need to make fusion crystals, and you can also use in the sausager to make even more trinkets. So anything you don't need, don't trash it, just dedupe it. Tip 140. Use the Super Duper to dupe any items you need. This is because in New Game Plus, you're going to have a load of raw science, so you're just going to be able to dupe whatever you would like. You need more toenails? Dupe them. You need more lint rope? Dupe it. Tip 141. You can assign item classes to the hotbar. Now, most of you know you can assign specific items like weapons to the hotbar, but you can actually also assign classes like food. So if you have a bunch of different types of meals on you, you don't have to pin one specific one. You can just put food as the category, and it'll just replace it with a new meal each time you eat one. Tip 142, utilize multiple hotbars. I like to switch between my hotbars, having one main one with my main weapons on, then having a secondary hotbar where I can like switch my armor, like between slippers and actual armor, for example, or pull out like daggers, shovels, the blaster, that kind of stuff. I would definitely recommend you use multiple hotbars. Tip 143, carry one weapon of each element in the late game. I mentioned this earlier, but virtually every enemy in the game has an elemental weakness, so if you carry one weapon of each element type, you're always going to have something that the enemy is weak to, so it makes them much easier to take on. Tip 144, utilize mutation loadouts to switch for boss fights and building. Now, there's 4 mutation loadouts in the game. I personally wish there was a way to unlock more, but there isn't, sadly. So I highly recommend you have one that you're going to use for running around the yard, and then have a couple of others that you might switch around depending on which boss you're taking on. Tip 145. Turn autosave on and set it to 5 minutes. This will mean if anything goes wrong or your game crashes, that your most recent save will have been 5 minutes ago at the latest, which is very useful. Tip 146. If you want to farm tier 4 weapons, kill a boss multiple times and leave their bodies on the ground, don't loot them, and then, once you've killed the boss maybe 3-4 times, you can loot them all at once. If you don't get an effect that you like on one of the weapons, you can just reload the save until you finally find the one weapon you're looking for. This just saves you time saving and makes it quicker to do. Tip 147. The best effects are specific elements up best and inflicting weakness of specific elements. I would also recommend things like lifesteal and other different effects. I have a whole video breaking down which effects are the best and putting them in a tier list. You definitely want something that has loot luck as well to get more loot from enemies. Tip 148, throw weapons at enemies to keep them in a stun lock. This is really good against things like ladybugs and black ox beetles. If you have a club, you can throw it at the enemy, and it's such a big, bulky weapon that as long as you have stamina and you keep throwing it, they'll just get stunned. Even if you just throw it right as they're about to attack, it's going to stop them from attacking and be very useful, but just be careful, if you run out of stamina, you won't be able to do it anymore. Tip 149. You need all recipe notes for 100%. This is the thing that most people most commonly miss because it doesn't show you in the menus how many there are, but as you can see here, there's 6 of them. You're going to need all of them for 100%. Tip 150. You can toggle things being visible on the map if you're looking for something in particular. Say you're trying to check which milk molars you're missing, just make it so only milk molars are turned on, turn off everything else on the map, and you'll be able to find what you're missing much quicker. Tip 151. You can toggle markers if they're on your screen. Like say you're during a boss fight and you just keep looking around and seeing all your different markers, you can toggle them off and make them disappear. Makes your life much easier. Tip 152, Ash Cement is an amazing resource for the final defense. You definitely want to farm this as early as possible as you can in the game. Just keep farming charcoal non-stop whenever it respawns, and then you're going to make it into as much Ash Cement as you can, because for the final defense, it's by far the best resource, and it's renewable, which means when it gets broken, you get all the resources back, and you can rebuild the walls without it costing you anything. Tip 153. Place random walls for the mixers and Java. This is because the enemies are really dumb, and they're just going to attack these random walls, and they don't really go around them or ignore them for some silly reason. Tip 154. Don't dupe fusion crystals. Instead, dupe the infected Broodmother Ooze. This is because fusion crystals are 20,000 to dupe, and the infected Brood Ooze is 15,000 to dupe. But one infected Broodmother Ooze crafts you one fusion crystal, so all it's going to cost you is a couple bits of deduper jelly extra, but you save 5,000 raw science in exchange. Tip 155. Don't use shields. This is just my opinion, but I don't think shields are very good in the game. They do protect you from enemies attacking you, and you don't have to parry with them. However, it is going to make it so that you deal much less damage, which makes fights much more difficult, especially things like the Wasp Queen and the infected Broodmother, as they have the ability to heal mid-fight. Tip 156, you can use decoy bait to distract the koi. So if you're going into the pond and the koi is getting a bit too close to you, or you're scared you're going to get eaten by the koi, throw some decoy bait in the opposite direction of where you're going, and this will make the koi swim towards it and eat it, as the koi likes to eat the decoy bait. That's what it's for. Tip 157, make sure to infect and feed the ant queens 3 times. You need to infect 3 different ant queens and feed them 3 moldy hoagies. It doesn't matter if it's the same ant queen that you infect 3 times or it's 3 different ant queens that you infect. You want to do this 3 times to unlock the Globasser necklace, because you want to make this trinket as frequently as possible. It's really, really worthwhile. Tip 158, always carry some form of light when you're exploring. Me personally, I like to carry the charcoal torch, but I know some people like the firefly headlamp. They're both really effective. It allows you to see much more easily. Tip 159. You can reload the game when you're collecting the burgle chips in New Game Plus. This will allow you to change the secondary effect. The primary effect will always be the same. Personally, I always like going to reload the pond chip, as it always has Veteran Diver, which gives you unlimited underwater time, and I try to get Sizzle immunity on it as well, so that it has 2 really useful effects. Tip 160. Fall defense on trinkets is actually the same as fall immunity on the hedge chip. They both grant you immunity to fall damage. I don't know why they have different names, but yeah, just know fall defense is fall immunity. Tip 161. Pet armor is useless. On medium and below, pets are invincible, so the pet armor is purely a decoration thing. It actually doesn't do anything for your pet. Tip 162. Don't bother with the charcoal canteen. It has durability and it's really annoying to maintain, so personally, I would just use the regular canteen. It's going to be much easier to maintain, and by the time you get to the high New Game Pluses, you won't even need a canteen. Tip 163. Use the Mantis Fountain. This is an infinite water source once you unlock it, so just get rid of all your dew collectors, put down a Mantis Fountain, and you'll be able to drink from it whenever you like, fill your canteen to your heart's content, and it is an infinite water spring. Tip 164. Upgrade to large chests as soon as you can. This gives you much more storage space. Tip 165. Upgrade to large pallets as soon as you can. Again, gives you more storage space for the weed stems and grass planks. Tip 166. Build a large stem pallet and large chest at the Java-matic. This is going to help you build crow roofs if you choose to use them, or anything else that requires weed stems. It's also going to help you store a bunch of the resources that you're going to use for building things, or store all the bug parts once you're done with the Java-matic. Tip 167. Build a lean-to at the Java-matic and set your respawn point at it, because if you die while you're doing the Java-matic, you want to come back and protect the mixers before the enemies get too close and destroy them. Tip 168. Change your controller binds so that you have 2 hotkeys for healing and weapon switching. This is going to change your left D-pad bind and your Y bind on your controller so that you can use them for anything else that you would like. Me personally, I use the left D-pad as a healing bind for my smoothies, so that whenever I'm getting low on health, I can just use that. And I use the Y key as a way to pull out my axe, It makes it much faster to do because you don't have to pull up the silly little wheel that you rotate around to pick your item. It's much easier if you can just press one button to pull things out, which is another reason why I play PC on this game, because keyboard and mouse is much easier to do. Tip 169. For 100%, you need to buy everything in the Burgle shop. You need to get all of the creature cards, excluding the baby ants and the infected ants. You need all of the data items, all of the landmarks across the yard, all of the molars. Every single mixer needs to be complete. You need to collect all the scabbies. You need to have the maximum brain power level. You need to defeat Schmector, the Broodmother, Mantis, Wasp Queen, and the infected Broodmother. Once you've done all of these things, this will allow you to get a 100% on your scorecard. Tip 170. Have a telepotty at home on channel 1, and then when you're running around the yard, carry a telepotty with you. That way you can place it down whenever you need to go home to unload your inventory. Tip 171. You can actually relocate the telepotty through itself when you go home to bring it with you so you don't have to go back and collect it. Tip 172. Don't rush to buy all of the items in the Burgle store in New Game Plus. You don't need them all. You're not going to craft all of these new weapons. I personally just wouldn't even bother buying them, especially things like the Burgle Eyes. You don't need them, so just leave them for now. The things I would focus on getting are the Yoking Station and some of the weapons, like the Blazing Edge and the Fresh Edge. Tip 173. Save your resources by duping your upgraded weapons in multiplayer. Especially in New Game Plus, this is going to save you fusion crystals on those higher level weapons, which are very expensive to get. So instead, just dupe the weapon. It's very, very cheap in comparison to duplicating the crystals, which are like 20k a crystal. Tip 174. In New Game Plus 1, you can farm Black Ox Beetles with max loot luck, and this will get you cones. This is the only way to get cones in New Game Plus 1, and I highly recommend you do it to try and get at least something to help you with some of the different events in the game, like boss fights and Java-matic. Tip 175. Carry aphid slippers and equip them when you're running around the yard to travel faster. Then, if you get into a boss fight or something, you can switch to an actual pair of leggings. Tip 176. Be mindful of the path you take your armor down. There are bulky and sleek paths which have different effects, and you want to be aware of which paths are good and which paths are bad for different armor sets. For example, the Fire Ant armor should always go bulky because the sleek path just isn't good unless you're running a full Fire Ant set, in which case it could be argued that using it might be a good idea. Tip 177. Only one person needs Battle Buddies equipped for it to take effect. This means if you have 2 people and you equip Battle Buddies, it's going to reduce the damage that that player takes from their teammates and the damage that that player deals to their teammates. So in 4-player, in theory, only 3 people would need Battle Buddies equipped, but you could probably get it as low as 2 or 1 person having it equipped. It all depends on who's hitting who. Tip 178. Be careful using summons in the infused boss fights, because if the enemies hit your summons, it's actually going to trigger the enemy's infusion effects. This makes summon builds really dangerous in these fights, especially if you're in multiplayer and you have someone at close range melee and then a summoner at long range. It's not going to work, because as soon as those summons get hit, all the effects are going to proc and it's going to hit your teammate who's melee range. Tip 179. Eat mints when you're sizzling, because this is going to reduce the sizzle meter. This is very useful for the Kultana defense if you're trying to unlock the recipe for the Kultana. Tip 180. Use Annihilator for super mixers and the Java-matic, as it's going to mean you deal more damage to the ants and make it so you kill them much more easily. Tip 181. Use Guard Dog for base defenses, along with the mixers, Java-matic, and Waft Emitter, as this mutation is very, very useful and makes it much easier to do all of these events. Tip 182. If you want Lil Fist or other hard-to-get mutations, then make sure you get them before you go into New Game Plus, as the enemies are going to get much more health and be much more difficult to kill if you do. Tip 183. Make sure you block cancel with your crossbow, then wait for the debuff to wear off. This means when you shoot with your crossbow, you block right after to stop the reload animation. You will have a debuff for rough reload in the meantime, meaning if you shoot, you'll do way less damage. However, you just don't shoot. This is so we can parry the enemy's attacks if they attack us before the reload animation is over. Tip 184. Replace your smithing station with the yoking station in New Game Plus. This is because the yoking station does everything the smithing station does, so you don't need a smithing station anymore. You can just have the yoking station. Tip 185. You can name chests and put icons on them to remember what's in them. To do this, you just open up a chest and press the customize icon button. This will allow you to customize the icon, which you can set to anything so you can remember what's inside of the chest. You can also just name it with whatever text you would like to put in. Tip 186. If you sleep, it'll cause all of your machines to complete overnight. So if you cook stuff in the oven and then go to sleep, it'll automatically be done when you wake up. You can use this to cook things much quicker. Tip 187. Once you unlock the Glowbasser necklace, you want to start non-stop crafting them with the sausager. These have 3 buffs, they're basically science cones, and you should have a bunch of G-Duper jelly saved up by the time you get here, so just start spam crafting them. Make sure you still have a little bit of D-Duper jelly left, but I would just keep crafting these non-stop once you've unlocked them. Tip 188. If Burgle asks you to cook a meal for a quest, you can just cook it in the cookery and cancel it before it completes, and it will automatically complete the quest and give you the raw science. This is a very easy way to get raw science. Tip 189. You can use the Mant statue to launch yourself across the map. This is done by doing exactly what I do in this clip. It is risky though, you can launch yourself all the way outside the yard if you're not careful, so you have to do it just right. Make sure you have a stack of gliders so you can cancel your horizontal momentum when you need to. Tip 190. In multiplayer, you can bounce off of each other's heads to get up to places that you can't usually jump to. So once again, if you want to go somewhere and it's just too high up, then you can jump on your teammate's head and bounce each other up to get into somewhere without building. Tip 191. Don't let the infused creatures near the cores on the Java at any cost. When you're doing the Java-matic in New Game Plus, you will get infused creatures. Do not let them get near the core. They are extremely dangerous. You want to prioritize killing these guys very quickly. They can destroy the cores in seconds if they break through your walls, especially the ones with sour balls. Those are extremely dangerous. Be very careful of them. Tip 192. You can re-roll Burgle's quests. If you get a bunch of daily quests and you finish with the apprentice ones, then you can actually re-roll the daily quests every single day if there's a quest you just don't like. Some of them are really annoying or really difficult to do, so I would recommend skipping quite a few, and this can make it easier to farm raw science much more quickly. Tip 193. Killing enemies with spicy weapons cooks their meat when you loot them. Tip 194. Killing enemies with salty weapons will turn their meat into jerky when you loot them. Tip 195. You can customize the light color of almost any buildable light in the game to match the vibe you would like. This includes fireplaces, chandeliers, sconces, literally any sort of light source that you build. You just press the G button on it to customize it. Even the hot tub can be customized, and you can just change it to whatever color you would like. This is really nice. It allows you to theme your builds around certain colors. Tip 196. If you forget the weakness of a creature, you can just pull your peeper out and look at them rather than opening up the menus and finding the creature card. Just pull your peeper out, look at them, it tells you what they're weak to. Tip 197. Use the fans underwater to propel you to the pond lab to make it easier to get in. Now, this is especially relevant in the late game if you're going back down here once you've done the lab. All of the fans will be turned on, and if you go right up to the fan and swim away from it, you're going to get a really big boost in that direction, which means you can travel much quicker underwater. Tip 198. You can use spoiled meat in garden patches to speed up the growth time of crops. This reduces the growth time that is current by 10%. So if it has a 40-hour growth time, the first piece will put it down to 36, the second piece will put it down to 33, and so on and so on. It does stack up to 5 pieces, and you can use this to grow stuff much quicker. Tip 199. If you use the spicy staff on the final super mixer, which is in the far east, it's really good against the ticks on this super mixer. This is another really good tip that I learned from Emmy. It's very effective at taking down those ticks in the big hordes because it hits them all at once and does massive damage. Tip 200. Build a mushroom wall right here for the final mixer in the east, and it's actually just going to stop the shield bug. The shield bug's really dumb, and he just walks around this wall instead of attacking it, and by the time he's walked around the giant rock, he actually doesn't make it to the super mixer in time to even attack it. He doesn't actually make it anywhere near the super mixer by the time you finish it, so very effective method for keeping him away. Tip 201. Hold when you're placing blueprints to build multiple at once. This is either the right trigger or the left click button when you place down a blueprint. If you hold that down and drag to turn to the side, it's actually going to place multiple blueprints at a time, and you can build as many as you'd like. Tip 202. Kill your teammates and res them to farm Reliable Friend. Now these don't count as official deaths as long as you down them and revive them over and over and over. I would personally do this to get Reliable Friend and always have it on one of your mutation loadouts in multiplayer so you can res your teammates during boss fights. Tip 203. Sickly roly-polies and roly-polies have different aggros on waft raids. When you do a waft raid, if you're looking for sickly roly-polies, they actually won't aggro you until you attack them. But the regular roly-polies will aggro you as soon as they see you. So if you're going for one specific gold card of the two of these and you don't want to kill the other one, just check to see if their eyes turn red when they see you and you'll know which one it is. Tip 204. You can relocate your walls once you finish a mixer and move them all so they're supported by a single wall so you can break it down all at once. This is good for two reasons. One, it saves time because you only have to recycle one thing, which is much quicker. And number two, it means none of your resources are going to drop into the ground. Like sometimes if your wall is half in the ground, you lose half the stuff you used to build the wall. Doing it this way means you get all the resources back. Tip 205. If you upgrade a repair tool, it actually makes it repair things better. So the higher upgraded it is, the more durability it'll have, but also the more health it will give things with each use. Tip 206, the killing blow is actually what matters for unlocking weapon mutations. So if you want to weaken enemies using a really strong weapon, as long as you get that final hit in with your fists or your hammer or whatever mutation you're going for, then that is really what counts towards unlocking that weapon mutation. Tip 207, don't use effects like poison when you're farming for these mutations. You don't want to use the Broodmother armor because it's going to give poison and venom to the enemies you're fighting, and if the poison or venom kills the enemies, it won't count towards your weapon mutation unlocks for things like Lilfist and Smasher. Tip 208, you can put burnt toast in garden patches. This will reduce the growth time, meaning you only need about 3 pieces of burnt toast to make any crop grow instantly. Tip 209, you can use rotten food in garden patches to have a chance of green thumb. This will give you a better chance of getting bigger crop yields when you're growing them. It's very useful, especially for mussel sprouts. Tip 210, some attacks can't be blocked without a shield. For example, the wasp booty shots or the bombardier's acid attacks, they just can't be blocked unless you have a shield, so you either need to jump to avoid these or you just have to get hit by them. Tip 211, don't parry the wasp's stinger shots, especially from the drone. If you parry it, it'll actually boost them up into the sky and they'll be further away from you, so if you're using melee, you won't be able to hit them. If you purposefully hold block, you won't take any damage and the wasp will stay low down so that you can actually get a hit in on them and kill them with your melee weapon. That is all of the tips. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video on the channel. Have a great rest of your day.